When people hear the phrase, failed Mormon prophecy, the discussion usually becomes predictable. Critics quote a few dramatic statements, believers offer explanations, and both sides accuse the other of ignoring the evidence. But the historical record is more complicated. Some of these prophecies contained recognizable deadlines, others were only partially fulfilled, and several received new interpretations after events unfolded differently from what early members naturally expected. That is the real focus of this video, not simply whether these prophecies failed, but how their meaning changed afterward. If you appreciate respectful investigations into Mormon history, like this video and subscribe to the channel. We examine difficult subjects without mocking believers or hiding inconvenient facts. Here are 7 Mormon prophecies that did not happen as expected. Number 7. The Civil War Prophecy Doctrine and Covenants. Section 87 is frequently presented as one of Joseph Smith's most impressive prophecies. Recorded in December 1832, it predicted conflict between the northern and southern states beginning with the rebellion of South Carolina. Almost 3 decades later, South Carolina became the first state to secede, and the Civil War began when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter. For believers, this is powerful evidence that Joseph could see the future. Critics point out that South Carolina was already at the center of the nullification crisis in 1832, when newspapers openly discussed rebellion and military confrontation. Still, naming South Carolina remains noteworthy. The problem is that the revelation predicts much more than the American Civil War. It says war would be poured out upon all nations, followed by widespread uprisings, famine, plague, earthquakes, and the end of all nations. The official faithful interpretation is that the Civil War was only the beginning of a much longer sequence that will continue until the Second Coming. That explanation is possible. But it creates an interesting situation. The South Carolina portion is presented as fulfilled, while everything that did not happen is moved into the future. Number 6. The prophet who said man would never reach the moon. In 1961, Joseph Fielding Smith was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. During a stake conference in Hawaii, he reportedly declared that humanity would never put a man into space or reach the moon. He spoke so confidently that he told his audience they could write it in their books because it would never happen. 8 years later, Apollo 11 landed on the moon. The faithful response is straightforward. Smith's statement was never canonized and did not represent official church doctrine. It was his personal opinion, and prophets are not considered infallible. That distinction is important, but it leaves another question unanswered. How were ordinary members supposed to know in 1961 that the president of the 12 was only expressing an incorrect opinion? He was publicly discussing humanity's future and its divinely appointed place in the universe. After the moon landing, the statement could easily be classified as opinion. Before the landing, members had no equally clear method for separating opinion from prophetic insight. Number 5. The United States government would be overthrown. After the Latter-day Saints were driven from Missouri, Joseph Smith sought protection and compensation from the federal government. President Martin Van Buren refused to intervene effectively, and repeated petitions brought little relief. In 1843, Joseph warned that unless the United States corrected the wrongs committed against the saints and punished those responsible, the government would be overthrown and wasted within a few years. That did not happen. Defenders emphasized that this was a conditional prophecy. If the government eventually protected the saints, the threatened judgment was no longer required. Others connect the warning to the Civil War, when the country nearly divided and Missouri suffered intense conflict. But neither explanation fits the original language perfectly. Joseph predicted that the government would be utterly overthrown in a few years, not merely that it would experience a national crisis. The historical anger behind the warning is understandable. The saints had suffered serious injustice. But understanding why Joseph made the statement is different from demonstrating that it happened. Number 4. The Second Coming Around. 1890. In April 1843, Joseph Smith said that while praying about the return of Christ, he heard a voice telling him that if he lived until the age of 85, he would see the face of the Son of Man. Joseph calculated that his 85th year would arrive around 1890. However, he immediately admitted that he did not fully understand the message. It might mean Christ would return publicly, that Joseph would experience another manifestation, or that he would die and enter Christ's presence. He also said the Son of Man would not come in the clouds before that time. This was not a clear prediction that Jesus would definitely return in 1890. The statement was conditional and deliberately ambiguous. Joseph also died in 1844, long before reaching 85. Nevertheless, his followers were given a recognizable prophetic horizon connected to 1890. When that year passed, almost every possible outcome remained available. The condition had failed, the experience was personal, the date was only a lower boundary, or the statement referred to Joseph entering Christ's presence. The prophecy became impossible to test because its many possible meanings protected it from any single historical outcome. Number 3. The Salem treasure. By 1836, the church and its leaders were facing serious debt. Joseph Smith heard that money might be hidden in the cellar of a house in Salem, Massachusetts, and traveled there with other church leaders to investigate. No hidden treasure was found. While in Salem, Joseph produced the revelation now recorded as Doctrine and Covenants, section 111. It referred to treasure, gold and silver, and told the men not to worry about their debts because they would receive power to pay them. Today, faithful interpretations often explain that Salem's true treasure was not money, but people. Missionaries later preached there, converts joined the church, and a branch was established. The revelation does say that Salem contained more treasures than one, so a spiritual meaning is not impossible. But the original journey was motivated by debt, and the revelation specifically mentioned gold, silver, and the power to pay what they owed. After material treasure was not found, future converts became the central fulfillment. What began as a financial expectation survived as a spiritual metaphor. Number 2. David W. Patten's Mission Doctrine and Covenants, section 114 instructed Apostle David W. Patten to settle his business and prepare to serve a mission the following spring with the other members of the 12. The instruction was specific. It named the person, the season, and the group that would accompany him. But Patten died in October 1838, months before the mission began. Faithful explanations emphasize that the revelation caused Patten to arrange his affairs before his unexpected death. Some also suggest that he continued his missionary service in the spirit world. But the text says he would serve the following spring with a group of 12, including himself. That earthly event did not happen. Others classify the revelation as an assignment rather than an unconditional prediction. Changing circumstances prevented Patten from completing it. Yet this still leaves a difficult question. If the revelation came from a God with perfect knowledge of the future, why instruct Patten to prepare for a specific mission he would never begin? The modern explanation focuses on the secondary benefit, Patten preparing his affairs, rather than the mission described in the revelation. Number 1. The Missouri Temple in This Generation. The strongest example remains in canonized scripture today. Doctrine and Covenants, section 84 declared that the New Jerusalem would be built in Missouri, beginning at the temple site, and that the temple would be reared in this generation. The next verse reinforced the deadline, saying that the generation would not all pass away before a house was built and filled with God's glory. Early members had every reason to understand this literally. They were gathering to Missouri. A physical temple site had been dedicated, and they believed they were establishing Zion before the second coming. But the saints were expelled from Jackson County, and the temple was never built. Almost 2 centuries later, every adult who heard the original revelation has died. One faithful explanation is that generation means a dispensation or spiritual era rather than a normal human lifetime. But if a generation can continue for centuries, the deadline loses its ordinary meaning. Another explanation says the saints' disobedience delayed the promise. The temple will still be constructed when the people are prepared. But section 84 does not clearly present the deadline as conditional. Some connect the prophecy to the Kirtland Temple, completed in 1836. Yet section 84 identifies the location as the New Jerusalem in Missouri. Using Kirtland solves the deadline by changing the location. The church can still believe that a Missouri temple will eventually rise. What cannot be recovered naturally is the original phrase, "this generation." These 7 cases are not identical. The moon statement was not canonized. The 1890 statement contained uncertainty. The Civil War prophecy includes an impressive reference to South Carolina. Other prophecies were conditional or symbolic, but together they reveal a consistent pattern. A generation becomes a dispensation. Material treasure becomes converts. An earthly mission becomes preparation for death. The overthrow of a government becomes a national crisis. A confident apostolic declaration becomes personal opinion after science proves it wrong. That does not automatically demonstrate deliberate deception. Religious believers often distinguish between literal and symbolic fulfillment, divine intention, and human agency, or prophecy and opinion. But those distinctions are most convincing when they exist before the outcome, not only after the original expectation becomes impossible. The real question is this: if a prophecy can become symbolic when it fails literally, conditional when the condition was not clearly stated, or future when its expected period passes, what possible result would ever count as a failed prophecy? The real issue is not simply whether these Mormon prophecies failed. It is how their meaning changed after history unfolded differently from what early members naturally expected.